I have been warned quite repeatedly about how disturbing this book is. Hello everyone, welcome to Harry's Book Cafe. Today let's talk about Pretty Girls by Karin Slaughter. Karin Slaughter is an author that I have never read before. I've heard so many good things about her, and I know that she has written quite many books over the years, and quite many of them are actually bestsellers. So I'm really curious, and I've done some research, and I was told that the most well-known book by Karin Slaughter is The Pretty Girls. However, there are caveats thrown in with the recommendation, and that is this is perhaps one of her most graphic and most notorious book. And it has been said that this might not be everyone's cup of tea because of the subject matter and also the graphic descriptions contained within the actual narration. So I was quite apprehensive. I prepared myself before I pick up this book. I like horror, but I dislike extreme horrors because I think extreme horror has no literary merit. Everything was designed to shock you without an underlying reason. I'm glad to say that Pretty Girls is far from that. It is not an extreme horror novel. It is a very interesting, very graphical description of something horrible that happened. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the story. So the book opens up with a brutal murder of a white man in an alleyway. The murder was described very well. The scene was set up fantastically before the murder has taken place, and during the murder and after the murder was done quite vividly. So I had no problem imagining the scenes in my head. So all the descriptive work was done really, really well. The story centers on two main protagonists, two sisters, in fact, Claire and Lydia. They also had an older sister, Julia. However, when she was 17 years old, she was kidnapped, and from that moment on, the family completely lost touch with her. They don't know what happened to her. They don't know whether she was alive or dead. So apart from the father, everyone else in the family managed to somehow move on, including the mother. However, the father, still tormented by the missing daughter, still plagued by the memory, and wants to find out exactly what happened. And the father's perspective was told in the book by the letters that he has written to the missing daughter. So this is the epistolary parts of the novel, which was done really, really well. We, as a reader, are told the father's perspective, the father's torment, the father's hope and anguish through all these letters that was addressed to the missing daughter. Very interesting style, really innovative writing choices. So going back to the sisters, Lydia and Claire, because of their older sister's kidnap, their life has always been affected by the tragedy of the missing sister. However, as I said before, they managed to move on in their life. Now, what happens afterwards is, in the present day, another girl of similar age and of similar physical look of the missing daughter was also kidnapped. And that is the central premise of the story. Remember, I was telling you in the beginning of the book, there is a brutal murder, and the murder victim was Paul, and Paul was the husband of Claire, so one of the sisters. Now, after his death, strange things starts to happen. First of all, whilst they were going to the funeral, their house was burgled, and yet nothing of value was taken. They live in a big mansion, this really wealthy family. Nothing of value was taken away from this burglary. And what's even stranger is that the detective who was in charge of finding the missing girl somehow dropped everything and led the investigation of this burglary. It just seems quite strange from Claire's perspective. Why would this detective drop everything that he was investigating, which is far more important than a mere burglary, and came to direct all the police resources towards this investigation. And stranger still was the fact that one of the law enforcement officer was actually an FBI agent. You know, Claire start to get really confused, adult, as to why not only the detective was not supposed to be here, but also an FBI agent involving in a simple burglar crime. So this has a lot more to do than what's going on the surface. So that's the first strange thing. Now, as she was still being completely destroyed by the tragedy of her husband, she discovered yet more unsettling and strange things. Some of the footage that she finds by accident on her dead husband's computers are very, very creepy and disturbing. And all of this that I have said so far has everything to do with a missing girl, or girls, plural. Yet more strange things start to happen. Now, Paul, the dead husband, was an architect, and he had a very good friend who, after his death, start to behave rather strangely, rather confusingly towards the widow. The atmosphere of something isn't quite right was built really, really well in the novel, at least in the first half of the novel. One thing leads to another, and there's a massive surprise sort of in the middle of the book. I don't think many people will see that coming. What happened is, towards the second half of the book, we were told gradually what happened not only to the original sister Julia, but also to this one that's currently missing. We're also told that the Karin girl who's missing was not the only victim. There are a lot more than the girl that's currently missing now. And layer by layer, like an onion, we were told what happened until the last page when everything was revealed to us. It was a really good book, and I felt that I might have somehow over-prepared myself for the graphic descriptions. There are certainly a lot of that, especially towards the last third of the book. There are certain descriptions that might be a little bit uncomfortable because they are vividly described and the author isn't holding anything back. So if you are uncomfortable with torture or assault, you know what I mean, to do with the women, it can be a very, very uncomfortable read. So it might not be the book for you. There were lots of blood, gores, detailed graphical descriptions of torture and things of that nature. So as I said, it might be not everyone's cup of tea. And I have been warned, as I said before, prior to reading this book, that these things will happen in the pages. Did I enjoy this book? I think I did, to a certain extent. I think the overall story has a very well developed narrative drive. It sort of effortlessly pushes the stories along. There are, however, two big problems I think needs to be addressed. The first of all is overall size. It's well over 500 pages. In our opinion, I think it's too big. It can really be slimmed down by at least a third. There are many detailed descriptions of the inner thoughts of the two main characters, which are repetitive almost all the time. And those inner thoughts most of the time doesn't really drive the story forwards. I think if the book was somewhere around 300 or 350 pages, it will be much, much better and more focused on what the story is trying to communicate. The other problem, perhaps the more severe of the two, is the lack of distinction between the two main characters, Claire and Lydia, the two sisters. Not only they look like, they also think alike. Even their names share the same amount of syllables. So for me as a reader, I find it quite difficult to distinguish the two whilst I'm reading the book. Sometimes I really do have to concentrate and see, okay, I'm reading about Lydia here, I'm reading about Claire. There is no distinctive features of the two sisters. I just think that the characters are a little bit undercooked. That is, however, not the case of the husband. I think overall the husband is the better of the three characters in terms of character development. So those are the two main problems. The other problem is, especially towards the end, is it's pushing at the boundary of what is believable, what is realistic. However, it isn't as large a problem as the two previous that I have mentioned. I would honestly give the the book 3.5 stars. I think is a very interesting story, if not original. It is brutal in his descriptions. I like that. But it might not be everyone's cup of tea. I do think that is overly long, and the character can do with a little bit more of development. But overall, I think is a very above average book. So this is my first Karin Slaughter novel. I liked it, but I wasn't blown away by the story. So I'm looking forward to reading her next novel and see if my opinion of her will change. But anyway, guys, is a pretty good book. I will recommend it. Only if you can take some hardcore descriptions. But yeah, that's the end of this review. Nice and short. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, please give it a thumb up and subscribe. It really does help YouTube algorithm promoting my videos through the internet, and it helps me as a book reviewer to bring out more contents like this on a regular basis. So any help will be really appreciated. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheerio.